Part 2 of the toy industry. Plus 150 million American lives lost and counting. Before we get into today's report, here's another principle of the depopulators. Never leave success to chance. Which means infiltrate, rig, fix, engineer, and control all systems, processes, and events that rely on probability, that affect the target population, such as local and national lotteries, the Powerball, Mega Millions, professional sporting events, all gambling, crime, terror, elections, natural disasters, business cycles, and weather. Currently in production for this channel is a video to be titled, How to Fix the Powerball, and Mega Millions Drawing and Get Away with It. Hint, it does not involve tampering with the balls, or the machine. It's much more simpler than that. Here's another principle of the depopulators, restated from part 1 of this series, based on the first commandment, from the Bible verse, from the book of Genesis. The commandment says, "Be fruitful and multiply." The depopulators' principle to contradict this commandment states that it is far easier to convince the target population to abort 1 million of their unborn soldiers in the womb than to face 10 million of the target population's warriors on the battlefield. Once the target population is convinced to destroy its unborn soldiers, the depopulators must continue to convince the target population that their numbers are still growing exponentially, and that the economy is always recovering, even though all evidence says otherwise. If Christians, or even non-Christians, followed the Be Fruitful and Multiply order and instruction, the enemy depopulators would be massively outnumbered, and less effective in many of their other tactics. Let's get into today's report. Bankrupt Toys R Us was crippled by Bain, KKR debt, not Amazon. It wasn't e-commerce competition that bankrupted Toys R Us. Massive debt, thanks to private equity owners, is what ultimately sent the beloved Wayne, New Jersey-based toy chain into a Chapter 11 process. According to the New York Post, citing data from ComScore and the Census Bureau, only 16% of sales in the toys and hobby sector are made online. That means a debt load of more than $5 billion was mainly what did in Toys R Us and not competition from e-commerce giant Amazon. These writers are always careful not to make any reference to the possibility that a massive decline in child population might also have something to do with it. Toys R Us troubles also stem from when it became a private company back in 2005 by its leveraged buyout firm owners, Bain Capital, co-founded by 2013 U.S. presidential candidate Mitt Romney, and KKR, under the helm of co-CEOs Henry Kravis and George Roberts. Both companies left the chain vulnerable by saddling it with a heavy debt load, just like Bain did with KBToys more than a decade earlier. The Post and other media reports point out that in both scenarios, Bain execs took the companies private, crippled their capacity to compete in brutal price wars, and blew off competitive threats from big discounters like Walmart and Target. Before we close this Toys R Us bankruptcy update, Pop Zero News would like to insert a comment here on some other unrelated current events. President Trump, like the more recent presidents before him, is failing to focus the young, middle-aged, and older Americans' attention on what is most important to the national security and future survival of America. Young and mid-aged adults are pouring way too much emotion, energy, and sensitivity into statues, flags, plaques, anthems, team colors, and other people's opinions. One person's aversion to something is another person's affection to it. Throw in some combustible ingredients, then stir and ignite. What results is too many people with way too much time, too many bad habits, bad table manners, bad upbringing, bad ideas, no direction, and no discipline. acting out for the camera and attention. There's no agenda or meaningful plan to rebuild anything on a set of sound principles. Just the chaos alone seems to be the objective and the ultimate high. The best way to focus all of these runaway emotions and energies is to activate a mass national military draft. What we have here is a lack of behavioral discipline and a lack of purposeful direction. Our military-aged young adults are acting like there's no one in charge anymore. America should not be totally relying on technology to fight our next war. The best technology should supplement a massive, well-prepared, extremely disciplined fighting force. We're focused too much on hardware and software, and too little on manware and womanware. When the world history we aren't being taught shows up on our doorstep, it won't be forgiving, patient, or merciful. And based on the following list of recent military headlines, let's hope the next U.S. war isn't with China or their allies. If shrinking families weren't enough, then what about shrinking armed forces? Where have all the soldiers gone? The Hill says more than 20% of the Defense Department's bases will be considered excess by 2019, according to a Pentagon report to Congress. We must close military bases to avoid spending money on bases we don't need, Navy Captain Jeff Davis told the briefing. NBC News reports. Base closure list becomes battleground. Lawmakers and officials representing communities with some of the 180 military bases targeted for closure on Friday vowed to fight to get off the list, saying their areas would be crippled and national security would be damaged. In U.S. military news, Trump wants to rebuild the military. President Donald Trump's vow to massively rebuild the U.S. Armed Forces comes with an interesting wrinkle in his first budget request, a call to close military bases. The Heritage Foundation. More military bases need to be closed. Congress initiated a process for closing military bases in 1988 when it became clear that the United States was going to reduce the size of its military forces after the Cold War. The Business Insider. The Pentagon could save billions by closing military bases. The fiscal 2016 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA. A more fitting label would be the National Surrender Authorization Act. A policy roadmap for the Pentagon contains language allowing for a department-wide examination of excess infrastructure, which our enemies consider unnecessary. A Reuters headline says, growing Chinese military creates uncertainty. The new head of the U.S. Pacific Command, speaking separately in Seoul, said China's military growth had exceeded the expectations of most U.S. intelligence estimates over the past decade. The Economist reported, China's military rise. The dragon's new teeth. A rare look inside the world's biggest military expansion. From a current active fighting force of 30 million Chinese soldiers to over 40 million in the near future, compared to the barely 1 million active duty U.S. troops. Then there's the questionable U.S. technological edge. This last Reuters headline offers some clarity. U.S. Army halts use of Chinese-made drones over cyber concerns. The U.S. Army has ordered its members to stop using drones made by Chinese manufacturer DJI Technology because of cyber vulnerabilities in the products. The order requires service members to cease all use, uninstall all DJI applications, remove all batteries/storage media, and secure equipment for follow-on direction. I won't get into how much of the $20 trillion U.S. national debt the U.S. borrowed from China to buy much of our military's advanced technology. When we're not surrendering military bases, we're shutting down toy companies. And when we're not shutting down toy companies, we're knocking over statues, pulling down flags, protesting, setting fires, spitting, cursing, name-calling, looting, and fighting. Who's in charge? Clearly it is not another U.S. president. Our young natives are oversaturated on sugar and caffeine, and are becoming more restless as the days wear on. China will not be demilitarizing or reducing troop size anytime soon. So it's time to harness, focus, and channel the unchecked, untapped, misguided energy of our dwindling warriors. Not to initiate war, but to discipline, prepare, and be ready to defend the flaming torch of liberty and freedom. When the enemy shows up, playtime will be over with, and chances are we will not have time to pull up our pants, find a belt, turn our caps to the front, tuck in our shirt tails, tie our shoes, spit out the gum, put down the joystick and remote control. Stop texting, tweeting, Facebooking, and step away from the cell phone. Thanks for your patience. Here is the rest of the ToysRUs update. Half of the chain's debt obligation is due this fall, and the remaining $200 million is expected to be paid back by December. Such a move could hurt ToysRUs as it looks forward to the critical holiday season. The company needs to secure enough cash to make its payments. Spokeswoman Amy Von Walter said in a statement that the company will provide an update on its 2018 debt maturities for its second quarter earnings report tomorrow, September 26. Earlier this year, ToysRUs laid off between 10% and 15% of its corporate staff, which amounted to about 250 jobs. The layoffs were announced just before Toy Fair 2017. The toy industry's annual convention that began February 18 in New York. The toy store chain's long-term debt was $5 billion as of April 29. It had $701 million in liquidity, which included $400 million in committed lines of credit. Attorneys at the firm Kirkland & Ellis are providing legal counsel, while bankers at Lazard provide financial advice. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, share. We encourage each one, reach one, teach one. No act of support or giving is too small. We accept tips, pocket change, offerings, donations, feedback, kind words, ideas, questions, and answers. We are on a journey, and would love for you to be a part of the experience. Thank you for stopping by Pop Zero News Network. You are always welcome. Coming soon. Part 3 of 3, the final installment of the ToysRUs bankruptcy series, where we expose more disturbing business/government connections. Also check out these videos for more on the effects of depopulation on business and geopolitical events.